Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada has been drawn into scandal around a corporation accused of corruption and his former Justice Minister, who said his office pressured her to drop the case. Toronto, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada promised a fresh approach to politics, one that was based on openness, decency and liberalism. Now he is embroiled in a scandal involving accusations of backroom deal-making and bullying tactics, all to support a Canadian company accused of bribing the Libyan government when it was run by the dictator Muammar el-Gaddafi. Canadian newspapers are filled with outrage and opposition parties are calling for a resignation. Elections are still 7 months away, but some members of Mr. Trudeau's own governing party fear the scandal has armed opposition parties with rich campaign fodder against its leader, who promised sunny ways in politics. This is a huge blow to Justin Trudeau's personal brand and Justin Trudeau's promise of doing politics differently, said Shachi Kurl, the executive director of the Angus Reid Institute, a non-profit polling firm based in Vancouver. She added, "That shine is not dented or scratched. It's been completely scuffed." The case revolves around accusations that SNC-Lavalin, a multinational engineering company based in Quebec, paid $47.7 million Canadian dollars in bribes to officials in Libya to win contracts there, and defrauded the Libyan government and its agencies of $129.8 million Canadian dollars. The Prime Minister and his aides have been accused of pressuring his Justice Minister at the time, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to drop the criminal inquiry against the company because a conviction could potentially cost thousands of jobs in Canada, and diminish his Liberal Party's political fortunes. She did not drop the inquiry, and in January was demoted to a lesser position in the cabinet, a reassignment that many of Mr. Trudeau's critics believe was punishment for letting the case continue. Ms. Wilson-Raybould later quit that post. The scandal has been building slowly over weeks and already led to the resignation of Mr. Trudeau's top political aide, and to Parliament's Ethics Commissioner opening an investigation into potential conflicts of interest. And on Wednesday, Ms. Wilson-Raybould appeared before the House of Commons Justice Committee, breaking weeks of silence. On live television, she calmly described the demands and veiled threats she received over 4 months from Mr. Trudeau's office to accept a settlement in the criminal case. "There was a concerted and sustained effort to politically influence my role as Attorney General," said Ms. Wilson-Raybould, who, as the first Indigenous person to hold the prestigious post of Justice Minister and the only Indigenous person in Mr. Trudeau's cabinet, was a powerful symbol of his government's commitment to both women and Indigenous rights. Mr. Trudeau has denied that he or anyone else acted inappropriately in their dealings with Ms. Wilson-Raybould. He has stressed that he has been trying to protect Canadian jobs, as Canadians expect their government to do, while respecting the country's laws and independence of the judiciary. But so much of politics is appearances, and the optics are terrible, of a self-described feminist, who had promised a new, open and transparent way of governing, sending aides described as his henchmen to gang up on an Indigenous woman in efforts to bend her will. Ms. Wilson-Raybould's appointment to Justice Minister had seemed proof to many that Mr. Trudeau was serious about correcting the country's wrongs against its Indigenous population and treating Indigenous people as respected partners in the country, as he had promised during the election. Now, that legacy is in question because of Ms. Wilson-Raybould's demotion to the post of Veterans Affairs Minister, which she quit last week. "Reconciliation also means respecting the voices of Indigenous people," said Sheila North, a former Indigenous leader in northern Manitoba. "This whole display has shown, in the end, money and power is more important than building reconciliation." In her testimony, Ms. Wilson-Raybould, who is a former high-ranking leader of Indigenous groups on Canada's west coast, reminded the country that its government had a history of ignoring the law when it came to Indigenous people, and said she had witnessed the negative impacts of that firsthand. "I come from a long line of matriarchs and I am a truth-teller in accordance with the laws and traditions of our big house," she said, referring to her Kwakwaka'wakw Nation's Center of Governance and Cultural Activities. "This is who I am and who I will always be." Many of Mr. Trudeau's opponents are saying that the entire controversy proves that Mr. Trudeau, who appointed the country's first gender-balanced cabinet, is a fake feminist who uses women instead of supporting them. "Why are not all women in that caucus, and their so-called feminist allies, calling for the Prime Minister's resignation?" said Michelle Rempel, a Conservative Member of Parliament in the House of Commons. The leader of the Conservative opposition, Andrew Scheer, has asked the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to open an obstruction of justice investigation. In her testimony, Ms. Wilson-Raybould described the pressure she received as inappropriate, but said, twice, that it was not illegal.